Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to a very, very special episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a very, very good friend, Sophie Nicolaou from the Highbury squad. Sophie, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Yes, well, Harry, I'm good. How are you? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going, I guess, is what I'll say. Yeah, busy time, really, really busy time. But the season is almost over. And I think for a lot of us in the kind of Arsenal space, we could really do with a breather now, can't we? I know that the summer is going to be full on because we're going to be talking about transfers, aren't we? Pretty much every day. We've linked with a few names so far, but you can imagine that those stories are probably going to rumble on for weeks and maybe even months in some cases before we get any conclusions to those. So I'm looking forward to the break. But I wanted to get you on today for this episode because I watched one of your videos. Is Mikel Arteta untouchable? Has he become the Arsenal evangelist? Are we too judgmental? That's the title of the video. And I'm going to leave the link in the description so you guys can go and check it out. Because I'll be completely honest, I was doing some admin this morning. And when I'm doing admin, what I tend to do is I open up YouTube on my computer as I sit here at my desk and I search for my favorite content creators and I put stuff on and then I go add to playlist, whatever. And I let it roll, right? And this episode came on and it gripped me because I thought you made some really, really interesting points. So much so, Soph, that I've always got a notepad on my desk. I started writing notes about things that I wanted to ask you based on this episode because I really, really enjoyed it. And I am someone that people will call a Mikel Arteta fanboy, right? I am that guy. I get it a lot. I get it in the comments all the time. I am a real big believer in the work that Mikel Arteta is doing, and I'm a big believer in the journey that Arsenal are currently on. But one of the things that often gets thrown back at me is, what has he done to you? Like, why are you so on his side? It's like a cult. It's like this. He's got this hold over you and so many others. And why don't you want to criticize him? Why don't you want to blame him when Arsenal fall short? And often my reaction to it is just to kind of fight back and say, "I'll get lost." When I get nonsense thrown at me, like, "Well, you're going to lose all your special privileges and you won't get a press meal at the games and all that crap." I get defensive. I admit it, and I throw mud back, right? And I shouldn't do that, but that's what I do. This made me think about it slightly differently and made me think about the bigger picture. So we'll get into some of the specifics that you discussed because I thought it was great. But just give us a little bit of a kind of introduction to the kind of theory that there are Mikel Arteta disciples. He's kind of an evangelist and he's got people following him on this journey. And in some cases, and maybe people will accuse me of being this, there are people that seem to follow him blindly. Just give us an overview of your kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, firstly, I really appreciate the fact that you responded the way you did to the episode. I've been thinking about this a long time. As you know, Harry, at the beginning, I was not a believer. It took me a while to become an adopter, an ambassador, if you, in the context of the conversation that we're having. I used to have a lot of arguments with Super Kev early on in the day because I couldn't see it. And Kev always used to say it's the players. But then it was undeniable in terms of what he was doing and how he had helped transform Arsenal into a totally different machine. Arsenal 2.0 was reborn. It wasn't just him. Edu had a lot to do with that. I remember talking to Gilberto Silva in Los Angeles, and he said to me, he goes, Mikel and Edu were able to do something that's important in football, and that's transmit the Arsenal experience as a player. Having lived the culture, been there, worn the shirt, been in the highs and the lows. And that was the moment where I was like, if Gilberto Silva is talking this way, then you listen. But then you get the results, the improbable season, fighting for the league. No one was expecting that. We all know the history of what has happened over the last 5 years. But during those times, even if I wasn't an early adopter and I became a believer, I was still criticized for, you never liked him, you never wanted him, you wanted him out. And part of that narrative for me was, why can't I say what I see in the moment, right? What we do is reactionary, right? And Mikel's talked about post-Liverpool press conference, he talked about action versus reaction. But for so long, we've also heard him talk about reaction, reacting to moments in games, adversity, losing, winning. And I always found it really strange that people wanted to come at you because you were critical of him, even though you supported him. And even still to this day, I don't want Mikel fired. I'd like to see what he's going to do with Andrea Berta. I want to see what role Berta plays, how that mixes with Mikel, who has the power. Are the Cronkies in the executive team going to defer more to Berta because of his prowess in the transfer market? And then, then the Champions League came. Real Madrid game, amazing, right? And then the PSG game, it's like, how do we go from dominating Real Madrid the way we did to then performing the way we did against PSG? And my take on that in the post-game show was consistency. And I was on TalkSport and Sky, and I talked about consistency is king. If you want to be a great team, you got to close and you got to be consistent. And some of that is mental, right? And so I question whether I love emotion, but is Mikel too emotional versus having that emotion? Did the club overly hype the PSG game? And did they go into the kind of history, making history? Because before Real Madrid, there was no expectations, Harry. We went into that game with nothing to lose and we played like kings. It was beautiful. Then PSG comes and there's all this hype. And I had Jordan Jarrett Bryant on the show and we were talking hype versus heart. And then you go into that game and then you come out of it, you lose, and you have no humility in the press conference. And so I talked about that. And then some Arsenal fans were like, you don't know, you don't appreciate it, you have no idea, blah, blah, blah. And it just kind of went on from there. And then the Liverpool press conference, which I felt like, I actually would have liked to have seen Mikel do this maybe in other games, in other matches, because the reason why I kind of then came up with the idea for the episode was I posted in the first half, no heart, no passion, no nothing, no energy. Where's your humility? Where's your kind of bouncing back pride, right? I was watching the Barcelona game on the other screen, and then I mentioned Barcelona and fans were like, they're fighting for the title. And I said, yeah, but we're fighting for a lot too. Might not be the title, but we're fighting for pride, finishing second. Imagine if we end up fourth. What does that mean? And I felt like he threw the players under the bus maybe a little bit. But then I made a post like in the second half, this is better, this is more heart, this is whatever. And that's when I felt like, I've thought this for a couple of seasons and I just really wanted to talk about it in that, has he built this evangelical status where there are certain fans that have this disciple, he says something in the press conference, they pounce, and that becomes the gospel. And that's kind of how I got to yesterday's episode.
I love it. It's a really interesting way of putting it. And I agree with you on a few points there. I certainly agree that his press conference post PSG was bordering on embarrassing, right? I did not enjoy those comments at all. I was in the press conference. I was sitting next to Tom Canton in the press conference, and we both looked at each other when Mikel Arteta sort of really went in on the fact that he believed Arsenal were not just the best team in the tie, but in the Champions League at that point. It was one of those things where it just felt like you're clearly emotional, Mikel. You've just gone through a really difficult two legs against a very, very good Paris Saint-Germain side. And just on that point about maybe why we fell off versus PSG in comparison to what we had against Real Madrid, I think you can really analyze it in a lot of depth. But I just think PSG are a better team than Real Madrid in a lot of ways. And I think they beat us fair and square. We didn't have our full weaponry available to us. And as a result of that, I think we struggled. And I said during the PSG game on X, I posted this maybe 15, 20 minutes into the game. I said that I didn't think Declan Rice looked right, not physically. He just didn't look right. And maybe it was because I had an elevated view from inside the stadium. And I had a lot of people saying to me, here he goes with the excuses. He's trying to find an excuse so that when we lose, they can turn around and say, no, it's because Declan Rice wasn't fit. That wasn't what I was doing. He didn't look right. And then he missed the next fixture. So
yeah,
I think that the fact that there were other key players missing, the fact that some of our better players are not performing at the moment, I think all of those things coaxed into one is the reason that we lost to PSG. But I didn't like the press conference. I said as much on the pod that I did the following day. I didn't really like aspects of the pre-Liverpool press conference as well, where he kind of doubled down on it. And I didn't like the tone of his Sky interview after the Liverpool game, not because I didn't think he was making valid points. I thought he was right to be livid and angry and pissed off at some of his players and the lack of application at the start of the game. But I thought he was a little bit dismissive of some of the questions. And I know that a reporter's job is to get these lines out of him, is to extract the headline, right? And so there was an element of that was going on to a degree. But I just think as someone who, is managing a high profile club like Arsenal, you've got to be able to handle that better and not gift people with headlines, with taglines, with things that they can come after you for. And you made a point. You said something like he's kind of loading the gun. And that's what he's been doing over the last week. And I can only put it down to emotion, because he will be as frustrated as anybody with how things have gone, with the fact that all our eggs were very much in that Champions League basket, and there's a hole in the basket and all the eggs have dropped out and smashed. Like, that's the kind of analogy I would use there. But I think just to kind of explore what you were saying a little bit more, and about this sort of evangelical kind of status where people look at him and think he can say and do no wrong. Do you not think that's down to the fact that people remember where the club was before he came in? Because I don't remember it ever being as rubbish, really, as it was at the very end of Emery's tenure. Not just in terms of the team, the squad, the results, the performances, just the general feeling was pretty shit. This guy walks in, delivers this amazing press conference when he gets the job, explains all the things that need to be fixed, and gradually he's gone about doing that. Has he ticked every box? No, but he's ticked many of them. Do you think the fact that actually, he's picked up a team from a shit position and he's taken them forward, that's undeniable, right? Whatever your opinion is on him. And also the fact that he kind of foresaw lots of the problems and then addressed them bit by bit. Is that why he's got that status, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think that has happened since, wasn't great towards the end of Wenger either, was it? Yeah. It's not just Emery, right? So the club, from a cultural point of view, from a winning perspective, and I liked winning the FA Cups under Wenger, right? But it did put a Band-Aid on what Arsenal Football Club are in the Premier League. And because we've won the Premier League multiple times, and you go to the old Division 1 as well, double winners as well in both different eras, Arsenal fans' expectations are super high. The truth is there's this narrative which I feel like it's rearing its ugly head again. When Arsene Wenger talked about fourth and winning and how that became like a cultural thing, I feel like the Champions League has superseded everything in football, right? Which is why, as much as sometimes Pep Guardiola annoys me, I do like how he talks about being champions in your country and in your league first. It's 38 games. The table doesn't lie. You can say what you want about refereeing decisions. 16 points isn't a lie at the end of the season, right? Sure, we've had challenges, we've had injuries, we'd have decisions go out our way, not our way. But Liverpool have been the best team this season, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so what I think the issue is with Mikel is, yes, people back him because we were in the toilet from even our players. Ozil, beautiful player. Apathetic. Mustafi, good guy, just not great. Then this click, Kolasinac, there were clicks. It was like high school. And Emery, I know on good authority from someone who was very close to him, tried to eliminate Ozil from the club, from the dressing room, but he wasn't given the power, right? Mikel has been given the power to transform the club. And it's not just him, like I said, Harry, when the transfer market, it's by committee, it was always 4 people. It was Mikel, it was Edu, and 2 executives, which I'll name or not name. But that's how it worked, right? So Mikel had a lot of love coupons after the FA Cup. Oh, we won the FA Cup. Some fans think that Emery's team was that. Think of it what you want. But those love coupons have expired, right? And I also understand the fans who back him, because the fans who criticize him are the same fans who say, "Who spent 800 million?" And they're the fans that criticize the owners. Or who sanctions those deals? Who's backed him? Who's given him all the tools and all the resources to be able to kind of reboot Arsenal Football Club? So I think the blind following is, I feel like it's that siege mentality. George Graham was very good at that, right? But that siege mentality, I believe why some other fans are turned off by it is because you haven't won the big one. You've been in positions to close. Quarterfinal, semi-final of the last 2 seasons in the Champions League. That's a great achievement, right? But based on all of the criteria of the backing and the money spent, the improbable season in the Premier League, then last season you would argue, man, we whiffed. We whiffed. And that also idea of we like to hunt, we don't like being the hunted. Mentally, have we evolved? So they build this siege mentality because that's what Mikel's been doing, especially this week in the media. And it works for a certain base in the Arsenal community, but some other fans, it doesn't work for, because it's like, I've seen it, I've read the T-shirt, drank from the mug, and still you haven't closed. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I think for me, the siege mentality thing is something that he has deliberately built. I don't for a second think that this is like, at times, for example, I thought Arsene Wenger used to come out back in the day after a game, and sometimes he'd be a bit salty, right? And that's because he didn't get his way. And anybody who competes at the highest level of anything has to have that fire in them, don't they? And that passion,
Agree.
and that little bit extra edge, that bit more competitive nature than maybe your average person. That's ultimately one of the big ingredients in terms of getting there, right? I think,
but it's more effective when you've won things.
For sure. But yeah. I think for Mikel, I think this is all deliberate. I think this is a guy who is very, very clued up when it comes to psychology. We know that he talks a lot with coaches from other sports. We know that he's very, very interested in the art of coaching. I wouldn't be surprised if he's read The Art of War as well, judging by some of the things that Mikel Arteta says and the way he goes about stuff. But what he's done for me is very deliberate. And in creating that siege mentality, you then create a split. And that split comprises of 2 groups of people, right? So on the one side, you've got the people that split to the right and chose to follow him and will follow him under all sorts of circumstances, and regardless of whether they disagree with individual decisions, because they believe that what he's doing is for the good of the club. We're going in the right direction. And actually, they quite enjoy being a part of something, and they quite enjoy feeling that us against the world thing. I'm a bit like that. If I'm being open, I'm a bit like that. I like that. I love that kind of mentality. And I've had to adopt that mentality in life, in other situations. And so I gravitate towards that. I love it. If someone comes swinging, you swing right back. I love that. Obviously, I don't go around swinging at people, but you get what I mean, right? And then you've got the other side, which is made up largely of rival fans and people that are waiting for him to fall down so that they can point at all the things he says, all the actions, and all the hype videos and all that stuff, and make fun of him when it goes wrong. But they seem to have been joined by some of our fans who have split down that path as well, because they're frustrated with the fact that we're not winning. I looked at a stat the other day, and they brought it up on Sky Sports, and this was after the game against Liverpool at the weekend. And we'd accumulated the second most amount of points over the course of the last 3 seasons. And we were ahead of Liverpool by quite some distance. And we weren't that far behind Manchester City. I think off the top of my head, it might have been 5 or 7 points behind them over the course of the last 3 seasons in terms of points accumulated. Yet we sat there sandwiched in between Manchester City and Liverpool with no title. Liverpool had 1 and Manchester City had 2.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there and you're going, how has that happened? And you're right to point out the fact that you need to be closers and you need to get over the line. And scoring 6 against West Ham doesn't really matter if you can't find the 1 that you need in the tightly contested game that's going to be crucial in the title race. I completely understand that. But in theory, theoretically, he's doing the right things. The team is producing high levels in terms of their returns and in terms of those performances, generally speaking. Have there been dips this season? For sure. And, we could debate that all day. No one's going to deny that there's been a drop off this season. But generally, for a number of years now, he's been doing the right things. So couple the fact that he's doing the right things, and the underlying numbers show that, with the siege mentality that he's created, he's almost created a hardcore Mikel Arteta fan. And those people don't want to give it up. And they don't want to give it up, not just because of what Arsenal are producing on the pitch. In fact, it's probably got nothing to do with that. It's because of the way that he makes them feel. He makes them feel like they're connected with their club again. He makes them feel when they go to a game that they're really, really important, because I've never known a manager in the history of football to talk about the 12th man as much as Mikel Arteta does. Every press conference ahead of every game, we've got to do it in front of our people. We've got to do it with our people there. We've got to live this beautiful moment together. He knows exactly what he's doing. And that, in terms of creating that siege mentality and this persona that he's developed, it does then feed into what you've said and how you've described it, which is this kind of evangelist figure that sits at the top, that can do no wrong, and that whenever someone comes towards him to criticize him, he just squishes them. And that's what he's managed to elevate himself to. And the right way to look at it for me is somewhere in between.
Harry,
go on.
No, I was gonna. I agree, right? And I was talking to Demian, who does a lot of our Arsenal women stuff, and he was talking to me about Aura, and it's like we've bottled up this new fragrance called Aura, and we're selling it, right? And selling it really well. I believe that a little bit of football, not just at Arsenal, is too manufactured these days and not organic enough. Stop telling fans how to support. Stop telling fans to cheer. Stop giving them sticks to wave. Stop telling them to sing a song. Stop trying to push things on fans. I remember going to football. It was organic, right? Everything that happened because fans created it. I believe the club's taken away some of the power from the fans. And I believe the fans need to get some of that power back. Now, you can say what you want about Ashburton Army. I know there were issues there. The truth is, the atmosphere in the stadium changed dramatically when Ashburton Army got involved. We see that in Italy, right? We see that in Argentina. We see that in other leagues around the world. You need to have this organic vibe, and you need to stop talking. Stop. I don't believe for a second Mikel wanted to make that video before the PSG game about creating history. I actually think he is a wolf. He is a lion. He is a killer. I believe that dude wants to win more than anyone at that club. He's obsessed with it, right? But then you get caught up in the marketing and the PR, and we need to stop talking. We need to stop talking about creating history. We need to stop talking about being better. We need to stop talking about this is our time. We need to start delivering. It's like being in a relationship. Can you please start helping with the dishes more? Sure. Tuesday comes, Wednesday comes.
To my wife? Have you been speaking to my wife?
And it never happens, right? And she's never going to believe it until you do the dishes, Harry, right? I think we need to stop. That's the part where I feel as a fan, I can't defend us against certain, fans, whatever, pundits, media, but it hurts because it gives them the ammo to say, oh, delusional club, oh, this, oh, that. Stop talking and start doing, Harry.
I agree with a lot of that. And I do think that when you make the decision to make videos like that or to put out that type of content, particularly when you're the manager of the football club, right? These are things that I expect fans to make. These are the kind of things and rallying cries that you expect to hear from certain sections of the fan base. And that comes back to what you're saying about it being a little bit more organic rather than it being kind of fed to us by the football club. I agree with that. But I'm of the opposite opinion on Mikel in this. I think he does want to do that stuff. I think he does deliberately talk about the fans all the time. And I think he does deliberately plant that seed because he's so obsessed with winning, in my opinion. Now, it hasn't happened yet. Obviously, he's won that FA Cup. But in terms of winning one of the big ones in the last 2-3 years when we should be winning the big ones, it hasn't happened. I think he's so obsessed that he is willing to do anything to try and create the most marginal of gains. And if he thinks that he's going to improve the atmosphere by 2% by putting out a video like that ahead of a big game, I think he does it because he thinks that that is going to be potentially a difference maker. But the problem with that is it's like a balloon, right? If you blow the balloon up too much, eventually it will pop. And when it pops, you'll be upset. Like it's like a child. Give a child a balloon and say, blow up the balloon. They blow it, they blow it, they blow it. They're loving it. Amazing. Wow. You get to this really high level, hype all around, and then bang, it pops. And then it hurts. And that's the thing. I'm okay with us doing things to try and gain those margins and to try and do things that will help us push forward and to develop and to maybe give us that little bit of an edge. And that obsession with winning, I think, is what drives him to do stuff like that. But at the same time, I get what you're saying in that if you create too much hype, then the come down is bigger and the come down hurts a lot more. I mean, I came back from Paris devastated.
Yeah.
I remember waking up the next morning after the game and I had to do a podcast before I left my hotel and I didn't even want to do it. I kept it short. I kept it sweet because I just didn't want to really sit and talk about it and relive it again. And that's because I'd got into this state of mind where I really did believe that Arsenal were destined for the Champions League final. And as someone who's not seen Arsenal win a Champions League, no one's seen Arsenal win a Champions League. It was something I was desperate for. And because we'd beaten Real Madrid and the hype came with all of that and the great feeling and the buzz, you start to believe. And then when that is taken away from you, it hurts. But then to take it back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier on, that's why, although I don't like some of the interviews and some of the press conferences, and I don't think he comes across particularly well, I kind of get why he is that emotional and why it's also raw still.
I think I said earlier, it's good to have emotion. It's not good to be too emotional. And let me throw it back to you as well, because I don't think the players liked it, Harry. I think the players want to focus on the match. And all of the hype beforehand puts pressure on them. And I felt like prior to that PSG game, the total opposite to Real Madrid, I've never seen, honestly, it was one of the most spectacular performances over 2 legs against the kings of Europe. We demolished them. We made them look like Ipswich. We played beautiful football. We took our chances. We had our moments and made them count. We did everything perfectly right. And it was against Carlo Ancelotti. I have so much respect for him, like everyone. The dude, forget what he's achieved as a player. Loved watching him as a player. But as a manager, what he's done in football twice at Real Madrid. And Mikel Arteta showed his intelligence, his prowess as a manager against one of the greatest. And before that game, the expectations weren't great. because you're playing against the kings of Europe. Who cares if they're losing to X in La Liga? This is Europe. We've seen them demolish everybody when they're at their lowest, when you think they're dead. And so then I know you said like PSG more talented. I agree. They're a better team this season. And Luis Enrique, by the way, I don't think gets half the respect he deserves as a manager and a coach. 3 years ago, when people were talking about is Mikel the right guy, I was like, give me this guy. I love Luis Enrique. I think he's so talented. And so you go into PSG and then you overhype everything, the pressure. I don't care what anyone says. If I'm going into a presentation or I've got to present a junket tour to a talent, we're working on a movie, you've got to open big. The pressure is on. You feel it. You start questioning yourself. You start like thinking, is this the right deal? Are we spending enough money? Like, do we have enough advertising here, there, or everywhere? I believe that all of that added more pressure on the players. And I felt in the first leg, Harry, it was evident. In the second leg, not so much, but it all started in the first leg and the home game. And I think that had an effect on the players.
Do you think that's why we did a shit tifo on purpose to try and not make too big a thing of it? Maybe, who knows? Maybe it was.
Well, with all that hype, we didn't back it up with the tifo, did we? I mean, that tifo should have been one of the greatest things since sliced bread. But again, control, manufacturing, right? Yeah. You look at, Ashburton Army have done their tifos. You look at what PSG did. You were there in the stadium. I mean, even here, like when the tifo game in South America and in North America, I don't care what anyone says. It is far superior to anything that's happening in the Premier League. But that just adds to stop trying to control everything. Let the fans be and let the players be. Don't overhype things. This is a team that needs to win. Yeah. Mentally, we're not there yet, Harry.
Okay. We're not there until we do it. I think that's fair to say. I agree there. But the thing about tifos and the thing about kind of trying to do things to manufacture the atmosphere, I think that's got to come from him. And I'll explain why. Because English football culture does not have these things. Okay, we're both from a Greek background, right? Cypriot backgrounds. You go and watch a game in Greece or Cyprus, you are going to see color, you are going to see ultras, you are going to see tifos, you're going to see banners, you're going to hear drums beating throughout the game, you're going to see flares. You go to other countries, you're going to get something similar. South America is a great example of a region where all of that stuff really matters. In England, it don't work like that. It's never been a part of the footballing culture in England to do those things. I remember back in the day, right, when we used to watch games on TV when Arsenal were playing at Highbury, you'd see the fans in the background. You wouldn't see a single red and white shirt. Everybody would be in their black or navy or grey jackets. And I'm not criticizing it because it's just the way it is. But English football culturally does not have these things. These are things that we've seen take place on the continent, and English football has started to envy. And so then you see clubs like us, like others, that try to then adopt some of these things because they look at some of these atmospheres. They travel to these places and they go, my God, that's amazing. We need to try and bring some of that to the Emirates Stadium. Now, I think it's got to come from Mikel to some degree because his messaging is always aligned with all of that stuff. But on top of that, I don't remember pre-Mikel Arteta going to an Arsenal game and thinking about what the tifo is going to look like, or or belting out an anthem before kickoff. Like none of that stuff ever happened. So for me, it feels like he's had a say in this, and it's because he's wanting to borrow something from a different culture and bring it into the English football culture. The problem is that the two aren't necessarily compatible.
Don't you think Ashburton Army had a lot to do with that, though? And they've had tifos rejected and accepted. I mean, they started it, really.
But again, where did they get that from? They've taken it from someone else. They've seen a team, yeah.
But also Liverpool, right? There's a documentary. Damn, I can't remember the name of it, but there's actually a documentary about the group guy behind the banners because Liverpool have been in the cop end, their banners. It's not been tifos, it's been banners, right? Which is a lot different. And Liverpool have had that over. I have to get the name for you and let you know. But there's a documentary behind the banners that Liverpool have created in the COP over a number of years. But I felt like, and listen, I'm not speaking about people who have done wrong in Ashburton Army or whatever that's about, Harry. I'm just giving an example of what fans have done. And I think it was organic. And I don't know if a manager should be controlling the fan experience in the stadium, because then it feels too corporate. It feels too manufactured.
Is it controlling, or is it trying to orchestrate? Is it
I don't know if orchestrate. I would like to feel more inspired, like something that is more organic in that regard. That tifo was exceptionally embarrassing, and the fact that we ended up losing the tie as well didn't really help. But I believe fans tell stories. I think that fans have, and I've got listeners and you have listeners, you know, like Morgie was writing to me saying, I don't know how to feel about all of this. All I know is I've been a fan since the 60s, right? He's got stories. We have a show, Unscripted Gunners. Like, fans have stories. They've got things to say. They've got things to tell. Not everyone is negative. I believe we need to put some of that stuff back in the hands of the fans, because it has more of a authentic storytelling perspective.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think, again, though, I think it's a cultural issue. I really strongly believe that, because, like, take for example, let's look at one of the Italian clubs, right? Let's say Napoli. You go there and you feel an incredible atmosphere, and there's a buzz around every game, and that is largely created by the ultras. Yeah. And this is applicable to clubs all across the continent. The problem is that if you don't keep a lid on the ultras, you can end up having difficulty with them. And if you look at what's gone on in Naples in particular in the past, you've had tugs of war about who's in control of tickets. You've had the ultras trying to sell merchandise that belongs to the football club and cutting out the football club. So you end up with, like, it's like you give them sort of that kind of rope to go and sort of do what they want to do in order to enhance the fan experience and enhance your atmosphere. But sometimes they can hang you with that rope, and you got to be really, really careful. And I think for Arsenal Football Club, the Ashburton Army, I love what they do inside the stadium. I think it's fantastic. I really liked the design that they came up with for the tifo. I asked the football club directly about this whole Ashburton Army versus the club thing that was reported about the tifo. I asked the question. I said, I've been asked to comment on it. Can you give me a steer, an idea, an understanding of how that has gone down? And I was told that the club were given this design after they'd already begun the process to deliver what they were going to deliver. Now, it turns out that what they delivered was shit, and everybody got upset about it. And that created even more noise around the Ashburton Army thing, because if you're going to take it away from them, you've got to bloody deliver and do something better. And if it was good, nobody would be talking about the Ashburton Armies one anymore. It's because it was so bad that that's continued to be a talking point. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the demand for tickets at Arsenal is greater than it's been in a long, long time. And I think that a group like the Ashburton Army, in that sense, then become problematic, because it's like, well, you're giving these guys tickets, or they're allowed to buy tickets. How do you then manage that and not have people going, well, I'm a loyal fan that's been going for 30 years and now I can't go because some kid wearing a black T-shirt is in my seat? Like, I think there are a lot of problems that you create if you give a group, or ultras in other countries, the opportunity to run with things. I think you have to find that balance. I don't think Arsenal found that balance. I don't think they
want the balance, Harry.
Probably not.
I don't think they want that image.
Yeah.
And the club's obsessed with image. And all big brands, multi-billion-dollar brands, have to control their image. And, you know, whether you're an individual talent or you're a conglomerate, that's the issue. They don't want that image. They don't want 5,000 dudes in black T-shirts looking menacing, right? I believe that to be my truth. That's my truth. That's my opinion, right? It's not a fact. It's just an opinion. And after that, I think that's where everything came in with. I mean, even Manchester City fans I've seen complain about tickets and ballots and all this type of stuff. Football's become too controlling. Fans are the most important thing in football, and football is for fans. And clubs, not just ours, are trying to control what fans do, how they act, how they behave, how they buy tickets, how they access tickets. And I feel like that's a growing problem in football, not just at Arsenal, in other clubs as well, from what I see, Harry.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think the bigger the brand gets, the bigger the company gets,
Mm-hmm.
and take the football side out of it for a minute, the more conscious they will be of those things that you've mentioned, the image, the way they're perceived, etc., etc. But like on the point about the Ashburton Army again, like an example that I should have made in the first place, but I didn't think of it till now, is what Crystal Palace have got at Selhurst Park, where they were in the corner of the stadium, for example, and demanded that they be moved into a central area behind the goal. And that caused all sorts of shit because they had to move season ticket holders who didn't want to move. And I remember Steve Parish had a big problem trying to deal with this because on the one hand, he's looking at it and he's going, these guys turn up every week, make a real racket inside Selhurst Park, and have played a huge part in generating one of the best atmospheres in the league. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I can't be seen to give them too much leeway because then I lose control, which goes back to what you were saying. But also I'm upsetting other supporters and I'm going against other supporters. And at some point, you're going to have to make that decision. But I think what Arsenal haven't done, and Crystal Palace actually did quite well, was find that balance. How do you keep these guys engaged, keep them involved, keep them doing what it is you want them to do, which is to generate a fantastic atmosphere, but not allowing them to drag your brand through the mud? And I think there have been a few incidents probably with the Crystal Palace guys from sort of what I can remember off the top of my head, but nothing major. I don't think, we are not Lazio or Napoli. Like, we are going to have people that come to the stadium, maybe dressed in a certain way, that create a certain atmosphere, but they're not going to go out with knives waiting for people on the corner like you might get in some of these other places.
Right.
So the idea of ultras in England will never be as extreme as what you get in some of the other countries, because culturally it's not in us.
I was in Naples right after Napoli won the Scudetto, and there's a difference when you go into certain regions, right? Firstly, it's one of my favorite places in the whole world. I love how raw it is, and I love how real it is, and then I love how 30 minutes down the road you're in the Amalfi Coast, and it's just beautiful. And quite honestly, I don't blame Kevin De Bruyne if he wants to go there. And it's an amazing place. You go into a cafe or a pizzeria and there's icons of Diego Maradona next to Jesus still. It's phenomenal. And, London's different because you've got how many clubs, Harry? 8, maybe, if you count the clubs in the lower leagues and stuff, probably more. So there's this tribalism, yes, but like in those other places, it is Napoli, right? But that you do have, Lazio, Rome, you've got all of that stuff. But there's certain other places where there are the ultras and there is that community and there is that tribalism where it's singular. I just think that, let me ask you this. Do you truly think the atmosphere at the Emirates has been good since those tickets were taken away from Ashburton Army?
No, I don't. I think that last season was probably the peak of the atmosphere. I think this season it's dropped off a lot. I don't want to dismiss the idea that that's partly because of the performances, though, as well. I think you have to factor that in. Like, for example, when we beat Real Madrid, the place was popping off like you wouldn't believe. And that is because we were achieving something special on the pitch. Ahead of kickoff against PSG, the atmosphere was even better than it was against Real Madrid. But once the game started and we conceded a goal after 4 minutes, it took the wind out of everybody's sails and it went really flat. Now, maybe if there was more allocation to that particular group, we would have stood a better chance of bringing that atmosphere back up and quicker. So I agree that it's played a part. But I think a lot of the time, the atmosphere reflects what's going on the pitch as well. And I think sometimes we overlook that fact. I mean, look, PSG at home, I wasn't working. I was in there as a fan. And if I'm standing there biting my fingernails, basically shitting myself, then I can't look at the guy next to me and say, why the hell aren't you singing? Because I'm in that state of shock. I'm in that state of disappointment because we've conceded so early. And for the first half an hour, I couldn't see how we were going to get out. We were really, really struggling. We were really under pressure.
You were at the PSV games, right?
Yeah.
So I think the English culture is, if you go behind, you shrink as fans, right?
Yeah.
PSV, listen, Olympiacos is a great example, okay? All these teams we faced previously in Champions League, Europa League, although Olympiacos ended up beating us the last time I was there. Those teams just continue. They're getting battered and they're singing their hearts out. I defended the fans on Sky because I felt like everyone was coming at us. I'm like, oh, I see. This is the new narrative. Now you want to go at our fans. The reason why we didn't perform well is because our fans weren't as vocal after we went 1-0 down. We got sucker punched. We got an uppercut. We were on the canvas. We weren't expecting it. And it happened early, right? Yeah. But I also think the players have a responsibility to play in a certain way to lift the fans.
100%.
And I don't like this Odegaard thing, doing this all the time, and Arteta. Focus on the football.
But that circles nicely back to Arteta, though, because that is from him. Martin Odegaard didn't used to walk around the Bernabeu waving his arms. He didn't used to do it when he was on loan at Real Sociedad. He never used to do it when he was on loan in the Netherlands. There's obviously a message from Arteta with regards to getting the crowd involved. And we hear it from him directly, and he's ingrained that into some of his players. And so now they feel the responsibility because maybe they felt it so. Maybe there have been occasions where they were really struggling and the crowd has helped them for a moment. Maybe they want to experience that amazing feeling of scoring a last-minute goal and the place erupting on top of them. Like, I think the experiences that they've had during Arteta's tenure and that constant messaging has now made this a thing within the whole group. And I'm not against it, by the way. I like it. I haven't got a problem with it. But you have to accept, don't you, that you're going to get shit from other teams and from rival fans if you do all that stuff and you don't get the result at the end.
Yeah. I felt like Reece Nelson, Bournemouth 3-2. Even the Eddie Nketiah 3-2 Man United in the same season. I was there for that game and I was like, holy moly, this is unbelievable. All those things felt organic. And maybe you have a point too, is what's the difference? We were playing really well in that season, right? But the vibe in the Emirates was different too. It felt more natural. It didn't feel like the players were trying to G up the fans. And I think sometimes I get it. Do it. If you're the captain, fine. But when you're in a war with PSG and you're 1-0 down, don't worry about the fans. You worry about how you play, and how you play then helps the fans.
Do you think then that, because I feel like we've seen more of the manufactured atmosphere this season than we did last season. Do you think that because we're not performing and the atmosphere has gone flat, they are trying desperately now to try and bring that back? So what I'm trying to say is, I didn't used to come away from games thinking, oh, that's really manufactured last season when we were in the second half of the campaign and doing really, really well. But I do feel like that sometimes now. But is it because they worry that it's maybe getting away from them a little bit? And it is changing. It's always evolving, and it's always going to be reflective of what you're doing. But do you think the club then, is the question I should be asking, have felt the need to try and manufacture this stuff a little bit more because they're feeling a difference inside the stadium? I will put it down to 70% the performance. But do you think that they can make it, closer? They can close that gap a little bit if they manufacture it by doing certain things.
Totally. I think there's a huge credence to what you're saying, because at the end of the day, they're delivering a product, right? Yeah. I hate to say that with football, but it's a product. You want it to be entertaining. You want fans to be happy. They also fill that stadium, and they make a lot on concessions. They make a lot on ticket day sales. They make a lot season ticket prices and all that type of stuff. So
They make a lot on a bottle of water, for God's sake.
Yeah. And it's the worst beer ever. I mean, if there's one trade I'd like to see transfer this summer, transfer the beer manufacturer at the Emirates.
Get Camden Hills out and get some Gil from Cyprus in there.
Get some Gil in for sure.
Half of the stadium's Cypriot anyway. Just get it in there and make us all happy.
And I think partly because the product hasn't been great, they're trying to elevate the experience. And that's what's been happening this season. So my 2 cents on that is make sure your product is better next season. Do the right things, invest, back Berta, do all of the things. Please empower him. Don't waste this man's talent. When you look at what he's done at Atletico, buying and selling, and, I'd like to see how that relationship evolves. Sometimes it was testy with Diego Simeone. Mostly it was great, right? Mikel he's had his round in the transfer market. I'd like to see Berta empowered to build this team and put a better product on the pitch, and fans won't have to be told how to cheer and celebrate.
Me too. I knew we were going to go off on some tangents on this episode because we always do. It's always a great conversation. I'm interested to hear what some of you guys watching or listening think about this idea that there might even be a bit of a Mikel Arteta cult. Like, has he got a bit of a cult following? Has that led to some people following him blindly? Do we have a divide in our fan base partly because of that? I mean, let me just be clear, by the way. I don't think this divide is anywhere near as big as the previous divides we've had with Arsene Wenger towards the end of his tenure and Unai Emery. I still think it's the minority that want Mikel Arteta out. I think it's a very loud minority. I still think the majority of people are on board. But the critics will tell you that Mikel's created this kind of cult evangelist following. And I would say, in my personal opinion, to kind of wrap up on this subject, and I do want to ask Soph about one more thing as well before I let you go, sorry. But I would say that is partly because he's come in as a figure that has represented real change. He's come in as a figure who said a load of stuff at the beginning, which everybody was listening to and taking in. But I bet you most people looked at it and went, I don't know that you can actually do that, mate. Like, the Emirates was soulless, and you're talking about bringing it back to life. Can that actually be done? Well, it was done. It's maybe dropped off a little bit now, but he's managed to do that. And we need to build a whole new squad. We need to understand what it means to play for this club. We've built a whole new squad. We've got players now that really want to play for this club. And we're far more competitive than we have been previously. And yes, we haven't got over the line, but I think the fact that he sort of prophesized a little bit at the beginning and then delivered so much of that, I think that does create this kind of like evangelist type status that Mikel Arteta now holds. And I think people want to believe. People want something good to follow. And I think he's very, very good at sort of reeling you in. Create the siege mentality. Get everyone on board. Work so hard on it. Work so hard on the psychology that people will question themselves before they question you. And it's brilliant. If he set up a church, I'm telling you this, Sophie, he'd rake it in with memberships. And
listen, Harry, do you know multi-level marketing? Right?
Not very well.
Okay, MLM, multi-level marketing, it's like the old pyramid scheme, right? But there are a lot of businesses that are successful that are legitimate. It's not like trying to rip you off pyramid scheme.
Not the dodgy pyramid schemes, yeah.
Yeah, not the dodgy pyramid scheme. Multi-level marketing, you have a leader and there's a product, and the leader sells you on the benefits of the product, right? And strategically teaches you how to sell that to somebody else. And then that person builds their team and does the same. And then it goes down and filters down and filters down. I think Mikel Arteta is one of the greatest multi-level marketers in football. He's very good at selling, right? And I quoted Alec Baldwin from Glengarry Glen Ross the other day. ABC, always be closing. You can sell me X, right? But can you deliver Y? There are a lot of salesmen out there that will talk about something. I mean, we see Greek uncles, "La fermo, do this, do that." There's a lot of people that talk a good game.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, can you deliver? The journey has to lead to a destination. I like fixing the floors in my house and going through that process and you're painting. Oh, this is good. But you want the end result, Harry.
Do you want to come
to
and do
sit
mine?
there.
Because I don't enjoy the process. Not
You
at all.
want to sit there and you want to bask in the hard work. You've reached the end. The destination now is the most important thing for Mikel, not the journey anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. That we're at the point now where the destination matters.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the journey and the difficulties that he's had and had to deal with, I think have hardened people a little bit in his favor. So like, because we've had so many ups and downs, and because he's been so open about those ups and downs, and he's been so emotional and so raw, and he's been critical of referees when we needed him to be. And I really do believe that, people always call it like sour grapes and stuff. No, I think that a manager who's defending his football club and his players has the right to call out some of the shambolic officiating that we've been on the receiving end of this season.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In fact, I think it's his responsibility to do that. But I think all of that has contributed to what we were talking about earlier, which is creating that siege mentality. And when you're in that siege mentality mode, you ain't breaking out of that mode for shit. Something really dramatic has got to happen for you to flip back to not being fully invested, to not being fully involved. Once he's got you, he's got you. And that's what Mikel Arteta has managed to create. And there's a lot of us that probably, I'm not going to say overlook his mistakes, because I sit on a podcast pretty much every day. And if I think he's made one, I will say it. Because I choose not to F and blind about the guy or anybody else involved with our football club for that matter, it doesn't mean that I agree with every decision. But generally speaking, I'm on board. And so for me to be critical, maybe it is harder than for someone who's not on board. Do you see what I mean? And he's created that. He's developed that support because of all the things he's done.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is like I said at the very top of the show, I would love to see what he and Berta do together. How's this going to evolve? What is this going to look like? Who truly has the power, right? When it comes to the ears and listening, and whether he's lost fans or gained fans or not, as long as the players still listen to him and buy into what he's selling, that is the most important thing. And when you talk about maybe the wheels coming off, the only time for me the wheels will come off is if those players don't buy into what he's selling anymore. And that's the most important job for him as a salesman.
And you will know when that point has come. Like one of the things I get really frustrated with in the whole sort of Mikel Arteta debate and conversation is when people try and put like this definitive timeline on it. So people will say, well, they did say at the start of this season, if he doesn't win the league this year, he's got to go. And then they will say, going into the new season, if he doesn't win the league, he has got to go. Right. Now, it's okay to have objectives and milestones that you want to hit. But I do think that you have to be willing to concede a little bit on those, depending on the circumstances. So, for example, if you told me at the start of the season that we were going to be without the players that we've been without for those long periods, I would have told you I don't think Arsenal can win the league. Therefore, if I then go at the end of the season, he hasn't won the league, he should be sacked. I'm basically holding him to account, to a standard that I never believed was achievable. So that's shit analysis. Like, I think go on.
Well, what if I turn around and said to you last season, we had everything kind of going our way. We were ahead of the game. We let City catch us and we didn't win.
Yeah. And but again, we performed to a really, really high level. A really high level. In the second half, after the new year, we won 16 of our 18 Premier League games.
Championship form.
Exactly. So you can say that we didn't win the league and it was a failure because we had certain things go in our favor and in our way. But we've done 99% of what we could have done to try and win the league from the position that we were in going into the new year. Now, That's why football is the best sport in the world, because there are so many variables. The thing is, you can't control every single one of those variables. You can't control what Manchester City do. And they went on an unbelievable run.
But we were ahead of the game. And what if I said to you that 1%, the other variable, is mental? And I've believed for a long time the difference between us and them last season was they've been there before, we haven't. The previous season was improbable. I'll give the team that, right? But at some point, you need to turn the corner mentally. Tiger Woods would always beat golfers before they walked onto the first tee. You know, old school teams, new school teams can intimidate players in the tunnel just by looking at them. And I felt like we had that intimidation factor. There's that fantastic picture that I think Stu took of Raya, Saliba, Gabriel, and Ben White looking over at opponents. We had this intimidation factor. We regained that. It was massive, right? And the difference, though, is in the spotlight, we still haven't found that X factor, Harry.
Yeah, we haven't. But again, my pushback to that would be, what is it Mikel that needs to find that extra sort of bit mentally, or is it the players that need to find that? And
it starts with the manager.
It starts with the manager, but ultimately the players are on the pitch and have to carry out whatever's required. But then you might get that message across to 10 of your players, and number 11 lets you down and doesn't have that mentality. And then because football is this amazing sport with so many variables, you could end up getting sort of let down by that, or being cost the title. Because so the point I'm trying to make in a long-winded way is basically that I don't know that you can always in football be in control of every element, of every aspect of everything that your team does. Then you factor in outside things like referees, rub of the green, luck, the way a ball bounces, someone who hasn't scored a goal in 6 months producing a 35-yard strike against you. Like, there are so many things in football that you can't control, that I don't like the blame game when it comes to managers. And I think mentality is one of the things that frustrates me the most when people sort of are critical of a team, because we can't assess their mental state. We have no way, there is no tangible way of understanding whether Bukayo Saka is ready to win the Premier League or not, whether William Saliba is ready to win the Premier League or not. We don't know what's going on in their heads. We are going to judge their mentality based on their performance. But performance and mentality don't always marry up. You can have an elite mentality and not be good enough to win something. Like, take Wimbledon, right? Tennis. Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal in history have played out some unbelievable battles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just at Wimbledon, but you get the point I'm making. They're both elite mentally. Sometimes one is better than the other, and the other one can't control that. Do you get what I'm saying?
But also one takes advantage of winning in circumstances that suit them. I.e., Nadal is a clay court guy, won pretty much all of his majors are French Opens, right? I think that we have Leicester City. They weren't the talented team. Mentally, they believed. Ranieri sold something to those players. Sure, did they have a little luck on the way? Every team does. But mentally, every single week, I would hear, oh, no, they're going to lose. Oh, they can't do it. Oh, they can't do it.
Up this week.
Oh, they're going to mess it up. And they didn't. Mental is massive in sports. And I think the pressure is different at Arsenal because the expectations to win are so high. And I don't know what you think about Peter Schmeichel's comments about Arteta on the touchline, right? Because I don't like being micromanaged. I perform so much better when my boss sets a tone and I get on with it. And I respect Peter Schmeichel. I don't think he's a Gary Neville or a Jamie Carragher as a clickbaiter and says things to incite fan opinion and response. And I thought it was very interesting what someone like him, who's one at the highest level, said about that.
Just remind me again exactly what he said, because I've only seen sort of
He talked
social
about how he's trying to manage everything the players do from the touchline in a game. And as a player, I would feel I don't think he used the word intimidate. It would affect me. It would affect my performance. And I think there's something to that, right? And this goes back to control. And Maresca, I think it was, that said early in the season, right? If a player doesn't do what I want to do, if he doesn't execute exactly what I want to, he'll be substituted or he won't play the next day. There's this robotic element that has come into football where managers want to control every facet. And I believe we've suffered this season from the inability to be spontaneous in games and creative. And I think that's hurt us. And I don't think it's, a stretch to also say that the players were affected mentally, losing Saka, losing Odegaard. If you're in a group and you're working together and you lose a major player when you're about to make a big presentation, that's going to affect the whole team. It works both ways, right, Harry?
I agree with the spontaneity point and the fact that we are a little bit too robotic at times. I've said it before. I've done a podcast in which I went on for about half an hour about how I felt that we were overcoached. And one of the reasons I really like Luis Enrique, who we talked about earlier on in the show, is because he seems to be able to find that balance between being really rigid in a system when they're out of possession, demanding incredible work rates in terms of how his team press, close you down, suffocate you, but also the top players in that team have the license to just go and roam and make things happen. And I guess if you're a coach that is obsessed with the idea of having everybody dancing to your song, you're going to recruit players that have that tendency over players that do have that kind of maverick sort of nature about them. But I also think that we've got a lot of players, and this might go down like a lead balloon, that I just don't think have that in them. So like Gabriel Martinelli, I don't think has it in him. I don't think Leandro Trossard has it in him. I don't think Kai Havertz has it in him. I think there's a lot of players in our team, in our attack, that are system attackers. Even to a degree, Bukayo Saka. He's got the ability, obviously, to beat a man and stick it in the top corner. But he hasn't got the same flair as a Dembele or as a Kvaratskhelia. When Saka gets the ball, I'm pretty sure he's got a picture in his head of what he wants to do. But those guys that I've just referenced, I don't think they're there. I don't think that's how it works in their minds at all. I think actually they get the ball, they haven't got a clue what they're going to do with it, and they let their feet do the talking. And all of a sudden they've created something and they're through on goal and they've got an opportunity, and it's based on instinct. And I think when you overcoach people, you take away some of that instinct, or you at least put a lid on it.
Yeah, and when we're killing the popcorn player.
Exactly. And you can't re-release that dragon, if you like, back into the world. It doesn't work. And that would be one of my big criticisms of Mikel Arteta, that his system, for me, has restricted players in doing what it is that we all pay tickets to see, basically. And we've got system players that are generally quite effective, and we've got a system that makes us difficult to beat, and that's made us defend much better than any previous Arsenal side in the last 20 years. There's lots of positives to it, but the negative is that when it's 0-0 and you're facing a low block and you're struggling, nobody feels that sort of license to just go, I'm going to just make this happen. Don't worry about it.
We haven't had the answer to that either all season, have we?
Exactly.
And the other thing real quick is adaptability. Luis Enrique showed that. Like if you look at PSG, okay, they didn't have Dembele in the game that we won earlier on in the season in the group stages. We bossed that, but PSG adapted. They became a different team after November, Christmas time.
Yeah.
And Luis Enrique adapted. He also gave Dembele some tough love, which worked, but he was willing to adapt, not be so gung-ho, find the happy medium. And I think that's why Arne Slot had success too this season.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
He found a balance in that squad where they weren't as vulnerable to lose a game, whereas they were in that heavy metal Jurgen Klopp era.
I think with Arteta, I do think he's adaptable tactically. I do think he's got that ability to kind of look at an opponent, figure out what he thinks their strengths is, and versus what our weaknesses are maybe, and try and bridge that gap. I do think tactically he's quite flexible, but I do also think that there are certain principles that he will never relent on, that he is so wedded to, that adaptability can only go so far. And although you might change to a back three, or it might be a back four, or out of possession it might be a back five, or whatever it is you want to say, I still don't think that he will completely bin his sort of theories and sort of real key principles, to the point where then there's a limit to how adaptable and how flexible and how different you can look. If you keep so many of the same pillars, then you can't really change too much. So I know I'm conscious of time, because I told you, can I speak to you for 40 minutes? It's 1 hour 10.
No, it's fine.
We're still
it's fine. I don't think, I think he's more of a like for like in-game manager. You don't often see him take risks. And I think that sometimes if he took risks, I don't think putting Thomas Partey at right back is taking a risk. I think that's trying to be a smart ass, if I'm being honest. Square pegs, round holes, right?
But again, to that point that I was making about the principles being the same, it's, think about it, right? What you just said is bang on. You're talking about him moving a midfielder to right back. It's the same principle of a midfielder playing at fullback and inverting, only he's doing it on the other side. He does it on the left all the time. So even though he's happy to do those things, to change it, to put a midfielder at right back, which might be outside of the box in a lot of people's ideas, it's still a principle that he has applied elsewhere. It's not a new thing. It's not breaking the mold. It's put a midfielder in at fullback and have him join in the midfield. Yeah. And if it's not on the left, it's on the right. Same thing though, isn't it?
Breaking the mold, and you've got to give him credit, because you wonder what would have happened to us. Breaking the mold was putting Mikel Merino up as the number 9. Yeah. I don't care what any Arsenal fan says. I believe Mikel Merino's ended up being one of the signings of the season of any team, because you have to look at what he did in a moment of adversity, in a position that he has hardly played, okay, and that he actually delivered results. And Mikel Arteta needed, because of ill-preparedness from the club, from him, from whomever, we never had that true backup. You lose Jesus, lost. We all know what we lost. But the Mikel Merino move, for me, that's taking a risk. I like that. That was good, and it ended up being helpful to the team. I know he got sent off against Liverpool, but let's be honest, his goals became invaluable.
Yeah, for sure. That saved our season in a lot of ways. It allowed us to progress in the Champions League. It helped us pick up some vital points in the league as well, to make sure that our position in the Champions League for next season, it's not done yet, obviously, at the time of recording, but it's not really in a great deal of jeopardy. Even if we don't finish second, we're going to finish in the top 5, that's for sure. And some of that is down to the points that we picked up with Mikel Merino playing at centre forward. So you're absolutely right. So I'm going to leave it there. We can continue this conversation on another day, because I've really enjoyed it. It's been fantastic. I didn't really have an agenda other than sort of wanting to start from your point that you made on your show. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Is there a cult following around Mikel Arteta? Do his disciples have something to answer for? These are all the brilliant terms that Soph came up with. Is he a bit of an evangelist preaching the Mikel Arteta gospel? Let us know what you think. Make sure you go over and check Soph's show out. The link is in the description. Make sure you subscribe as well to the Highbury Squad. Leave us a like, subscribe, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, all the usual places. And we'll see you all very, very soon. But Soph's going to let you know how you can follow her. And I know it's all in the description, but tell them what you've got.
At Highbury Squad, and hoping to have a chat with Warren Barton, Newcastle icon, before the big game. And Harry, I just wanted to say something to you. I've been following you for a long time now. It's really funny. I was clearing out my emails the other day, and I found an email that I think you may have sent to me 6 or 7 years ago about when you were writing Chronicles of a Gooner. And you reached out because you wanted us to know about your book. And I remember at the time we invited you on the show, And I just wanted to say to you, congratulations for another amazing season. It's really fills me with pride, and maybe it's because I'm a fellow Greek Cypriot. You get a little extra from me. But to see you commentating on non-Arsenal stuff, I think has been real fun this season as well. And you're doing it from all corners, right? Lower leagues, Champions League. So I just wanted to say, well done. Keep up the great work. You're doing phenomenal. And I'm really proud of all the stuff that you've achieved this year. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next season as well. So well done.
Thank you, Soph. I will send you a check a little bit later on. Thank you for that. Lovely. No, and likewise, honestly, thank you for all the support over the years and stuff, and for having me on your pod and for coming on my pod. And you've become a real friend as well, which is really important. I think in this space of like YouTube and podcasts, you end up with a lot of people that are at each other's throats, and they're always point scoring against each other. And I've made some amazing friends out of it. So thank you for that, and for all the amazing stuff that you do as well. You're across the pond, long way away, but you're still so tuned into Arsenal, which I find amazing. You cover your MLS stuff, you're big on women's football, and you put together some unbelievable shows on the Highbury Squad. Topics I would never think of, guests I would never think of, but you managed to find them and make it all work. So congratulations on that. And everybody subscribe, all the rest of it, you know the drill by now. And we will see you very soon. This was a pre-recorded episode. We recorded this on Tuesday night. So forgive me if while this is like premiering on Wednesday morning, there's some big breaking news.
We've signed Isaac.
Yeah, that you guys think we're completely ignoring. That is not the case. We'll pick up any news that breaks between now and tomorrow in due course. But I thought that was a really interesting conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Goodbye.